In their new book, The Catholic School Playbook, Michael Ortner and Kimberly Begg note, quote, "For decades, school curricula and methods have evolved to reflect an increasingly secular worldview, one that sees the world through the distorted lens of materialism, progressivism, and the rejection of God and tradition. But," they go on, "the utilitarianism of modern education is incompatible with the salvific goal of the Catholic Church. And yet many Catholic schools today are indistinguishable from their secular counterparts. They've abandoned the rich intellectual tradition and sacramental life of the Church, replacing morality with relativism, wonder with pragmatism, and exploration with test preparation," close quote. What are we to do? Michael Ortner will help us consider the best way forward as we discuss his new book, The Catholic School Playbook, now. My name is Tod Worner, and this is the Evangelization Culture Podcast from Word on Fire. Michael Ortner is the co-author of the Catholic School Playbook, published in early 2025 by Word on Fire, which highlights the educational renewal happening within Catholic primary and secondary schools throughout the United States. He serves on the boards of St. Jerome Institute, Catholic Education Partners, Cana Academy, and the Classic Learning Test. Mike is the founder of Capterra, an online marketplace for business software, which won awards from Inc. magazine for being one of the 500 fastest growing companies in the United States, and from Washington Business Journal for being one of the best places to work in the DC area prior to selling the company to Gartner. He is also the founder of Run with the Saints, a platform to connect practicing Catholics who live near each other and share similar interests. Mike has a finance degree from Georgetown University and a philosophy degree from the University of London. He lives in McLean, Virginia, with his wife Liz and their 6 children, and he has coached across more than 100 sports teams, including soccer, basketball, and baseball. Michael Ortner, welcome.
Thank you, Tod. It's great to be here.
Segment 1. What went wrong with so many Catholic schools? In the opening pages of the Catholic School Playbook, Michael Ortner writes that after St. Mary's in Philadelphia was established as the first Catholic school in America, quote, "a tradition of Catholic education proliferated in the 1800s and eventually peaked during the 1965-66 school year when approximately 5.7 million K-12 students, that is over 10% of all school-age children in the United States, attended more than 12,000 Catholic schools. But over the last 60 years, despite the number of self-identifying Catholics in the United States growing by over 50%, Catholic school enrollment has plummeted by 75%, and over half of Catholic schools have closed. In the 2020 and 2021 school year, just 1.6 million students attended fewer than 6,000 Catholic schools. So, Michael, let's begin with the obvious question. What happened?
A lot happened. It's hard to boil it down to just one thing. So there's a number of things that happened. So we don't want to reduce it or oversimplify it. So I'll say a few of the big things here, Tod. And really, it sounds like a doomsday scenario that we just painted, and that was deliberate. But there really is hope in the story, and I look forward to getting to that. But I think so. First and foremost, we peaked in 1965, and it's been a huge drop off since then. That was the peak of so many things in the Catholic Church. You look at vocations, you look at mass attendance, you look at so many of the metrics that one would use to measure the health of our Catholic faith and the faith life in the country. And that was the high water mark. So many things started plummeting in the wake of the rollout of Vatican II. And not just Vatican II, but in the all the things that were happening within our culture that started to replace important things like faith at the center of our lives. Everything from the entertainment industry, TV took off. A lot of the mass entertainment started to take off around then. And lots of secularizing forces kicked off in the 60s, picked up speed in the 70s and 80s. And the Catholic Church has struggled to respond to that. So I'd say that was the beginning. So when you look at vocations plummeting in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, And so most of the Catholic schools, if you go back to the mid 1900s, they were largely taught by the religious, by nuns and some priests. And when the number of nuns declines by so much, you have what was a wonderful talent base to pull from. Nuns and priests receive amazing formation in philosophy and theology. And so when you lose their faith and their philosophical training, and to be blunt, they had low salaries. It was cheap labor.
Yeah.
So when you have both of those things happen, and you've got to replace that workforce with a workforce with a lay workforce that is not as well formed philosophically and theologically, and you have to pay a higher wage to, that's a recipe for disaster, right? So I think I would say first and foremost, it begins with that, but I think it doesn't end there. So tuition had to go up, right, to keep pace with your expenses. So tuition goes up. So Catholic school used to be a deal, and it becomes less and less of a bargain over time.
Yeah.
But then you add to that other challenges, and especially if you look over the last 30 years, you look at what the Catholic schools tried to do to keep up with the public schools.
Yeah.
So you look at movements like a computer for every child.
Yeah.
You look at the impact that the College Board has had on curriculum throughout not just high schools, but even in lower grades. So you look at all these other forces, and Catholic schools lost their way to a degree. So like when I talk with my mother went to Catholic school, and she recalls having Latin. She recalls, reading some classic texts, maybe the Divine Comedy, Augustine's Confessions. And her education wasn't amazing. I think when you look at what some of the Catholic schools that are part of the renewal that are doing today, it wasn't at that level back then.
Right.
But they were still holding on to much of the Catholic intellectual heritage that, they had that back then. And we lost much of that along the way. So when you're trying to keep up with the public schools in terms of technology, in terms of curriculum, content, pedagogy, and then when you've got this movement that swept through not only Catholic schools but public schools of a decrease in the liberal arts and an increase in this idea of school is all about college and career readiness, a very practical, a very utilitarian outlook on what education is. And when the Catholic schools feel like they need to follow suit on that, it's a recipe for disaster. So they now lose what distinguishes them, what differentiates them from the public schools.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, we don't want to overstate it. Most Catholic schools still have some prayer life. There is mass is optional. It's there. Some students go to it. You'll have a religion class. So, and often you'll have, better behavior. You'll have better behavior. So there are, I don't want to equate Catholic schools with public schools because I think I don't want to overstate it. But when you're only differentiated by a little bit, it's not going to cut it. So when you can go for free to the public school down the street or pay $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 for the Catholic school that's a short drive away, most families are going to choose the free public school, particularly when it's because they're so much better funded. Yeah. So they even have there are some things that the public schools are going to beat Catholic schools on. A lot of the resources, a lot of the sports field, all sorts of things. But that's not where Catholic schools should be competing. But that is where they've tried to compete over these last 50 years. So they lost. It's like they took took their eye off the ball and followed in the footpaths of the public schools after experiencing, a bit of a brain drain and loss of the labor of these nuns. And I would say those are some of the bigger factors.
Sure.
And then I would just end that with, even more recently, I think what all of this has led to, what do parents expect from their schools? It's changed. Today, it's not only, preparation for your career, but the huge investment that schools make in, particularly in sports. Sports is a huge one. But you get other areas as well. Again, the computers is a big part of it, and lots of other services that public schools are able to offer. And parents now have come to expect some of these things.
Yeah.
And they've devalued some of the other things that Catholic schools are actually well positioned to provide, but these have become devalued over time.
So let me ask you this, Mike. So if I've heard it once, I've heard it probably 100 times. First of all, I want to say just of my own experience with my kids having gone through a parish school for their elementary school, now at a Catholic kind of classical prep school. Wonderful experience. Wonderful experience. So I want to say, I feel blessed that when I'm reading what you're writing in your book, boy, so much of that has been enacted at the schools that I've had experience with. But I know that's not the case. I've talked to a lot of other people that are other schools that have a different experience. So if I've heard it once, I've heard it maybe 100 times. People have grown somewhat frustrated, and they leave Catholic schools that seem to have cashiered all but the ornamentation of the faith and have in fact become just another expensive prep school. So my question is, as you're discussing kind of what's happened with this drop off over the last, 70 years or what have you, or 50 years or what have you, is this a matter of a slow watering down of the faith in the Catholic schools, or is it more of an abandonment of the faith? What's your sense about that?
I think it's more of there are some Catholic schools. I mean, really, it's a mix. There's a spectrum, right?
Sure,
so
sure.
you visit some Catholic schools, and it does feel like a complete abandonment. But I would say the more common one would be the slow watering down.
Sure.
I think most Catholic schools are trying to varying degrees, but they've forgotten what a beautiful liberal arts, truth-seeking education and formation can look like. And for many of them, it's because at this point in time, they never experienced it for themselves. So most Catholic school leaders and Catholic school teachers, many of them went to Catholic school, but at this point, they went to Catholic school back in the 1980s, 1990s, and they had already lost their way at that point.
Yeah.
So I do think most Catholic school leaders and teachers are trying. Mm-hmm. Unless you've seen it, and unless you've seen it performed in a much better way, in a more beautiful way, which is part of the reason why we wrote the book. Mm-hmm. It's hard to know what to do, because it's like they have to reinvent it from the very beginning.
Yeah. Mike, in the opening chapter of the Catholic School Playbook, you describe mission as the heart and soul of the school. Now, there are people out there that would roll their eyes at boilerplate mission and vision statements, but you see this differently. Could you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So anyone who's leading the school, and that includes if there's a governing body, if it's an independent Catholic school, it's their board of governors. If it's a parish school, it is. It's the pastor. If it's a diocesan school, it would be the bishop and superintendent. So the leadership of the school, they need a beautiful vision for the school, for the mission, what exactly they're trying to do, and it must be very different than the public school down the street. If you stick to training global citizens, preparation for your career, these sorts of things that are very common at public schools, if that's what you're aiming for at your Catholic school, as captured in your mission statement and your vision for what you're trying to accomplish, there's no way you're going to succeed because you've set the wrong goal right out of the gate.
Right.
So it's very important, just like for any organization. Look, I think when we were growing up, we looked at mission statements of organizations as boring and meaningless, right? But I think it's become very clear, certainly over the last 10, 20, 30 years, in both the for-profit world and the nonprofit world, every organization needs to be very, very clear about what they're trying to accomplish, what their mission is, and how they're going to measure whether they're accomplishing their mission. So getting your mission right out of the gate and recognizing that Catholic schools are in existence to evangelize the students, to form them in virtue, and cultivate their sense of wonder. I think that is at the core. Those things are at the core of what Catholic schools should be aiming for. And if it's not that, you're going to run into challenges right out of the gate. Because if you don't, that guides who you hire. It guides the principal you're going to hire. It guides all the teachers you're going to end up hiring and all of that. So that has to come first.
Mike, I've served on an advisory board of my kids' parish elementary school, and I remember certain voices that were championing just what you described, because kind of facilities upgrades and technology advancements. And a lot of this was saying, this is keeping up with the Joneses a little bit, looking at the public schools. It's going to attract people, new families, and so on and so forth. And not that we don't think those measures are important, but the refrain that I kept returning to again and again was to remind that we're here to form and not just educate our kids to see through a Catholic lens or live by a Catholic sensibility. So I kind of feel like in a sea of schools that have certain niches, even outside the public schools, art or within the public schools, some public schools have certain emphases within the district: art immersion, language immersion, music immersion. It struck me that our school should be a Catholic immersion. Let's run towards the Catholic faith, and let's not again, like you said, let's not be a doppelganger for the public school that's out there. The thing that I've discovered though over time is it kind of a best or a well-kept secret that Catholicism, it brilliantly forms faith, the intellect, and the aesthetic sense in our children, but also when done right, it's good for business. I mean, I think sometimes there's this kind of walking away from those themes and again, trying to approximate the public school in its own right. And like I said, some of these places become expensive prep schools. They become hardly Catholic. When in fact, when you embrace your Catholic faith and you still strive for academic excellence and a degree of technological parity where it's appropriate and so on, it can be a home run. I mean, what's your sense about good Catholic schools and good business being dovetailing one with the other?
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, I think that's spot on. So Catholic schools have it should be in their very nature that they have an obvious way to differentiate themselves from all the other local schools. And I think where we are in the movement is that's when if you're leading a Catholic school, if you're the pastor, you've hired a principal, and as the two of you are thinking through the mission and vision of your school and how you're going to differentiate and compete with all the other local schools, our Catholic identity should be right at the heart of that. And that is going to give us a value proposition in a way of clearly differentiating ourselves and attracting amazing talent to come want to teach at the school.
Sure. You'll
become a magnet for teachers that are well-formed in their faith, intellectually and spiritually, and it's a great differentiator. And it's not just, and let's be really clear, I think cultivating the spiritual and moral virtues should be done in parallel. They go in conjunction with cultivating the intellectual virtues.
Yeah.
And the beauty of one of the many beauties of the Catholic faith is we have such a rich intellectual heritage that not only, and I'm not just talking about the obvious people like Augustine and Aquinas, but the entire Western tradition the Catholic schools love to take anything that's beautiful and true that's out there. And so by the time you get into high school, you're reading great non-Catholic authors as well, ranging from, of course, Homer and Plato and Aristotle all the way on up. So you take all that is good and beautiful out there and you bring this into this rich intellectual tradition. And it's so helpful to our students to experience, to study all of these and read the great works of all of the greatest minds, because these are the sources for all of the current intellectual currents. We have to go back to the sources. And so the Catholic Church, it does this like no one else. They know exactly, they've been doing this for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
So it's being able to tap into that, and you will be automatically different from all the other schools in your area. The ideal scenario would be is that once all Catholic schools have kind of woken up to this and adopted this approach and kind of returned to their roots, then 10, 20, 30 years from now, you'll get all these ideally great Catholic schools further differentiating themselves through some of these other ways.
Yeah.
But they have to be authentically Catholic at their core before they start doing the second order differentiation. Mm-hmm. So a perfect example of that would be, there are a number of Catholic schools that are doing a great job on, like, I think it's a beautiful thing to have a bilingual student base. Like, I wish I learned Spanish growing up. That would have been amazing. And we shouldn't start learning a foreign language when we're in 7th grade, like I did, and many students do. We should be learning that like in preschool or kindergarten, and do it throughout, and do sort of a dual language program. I think that's beautiful. But that can't be the primary way that a Catholic school is differentiating itself. That should be an add-on to their core way of differentiating themselves, which is embracing their Catholic intellectual heritage throughout, and embracing the Catholic spiritual life throughout the school day and throughout the week, and ingrained into their culture and their curriculum.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's well said. Mike, in the Catholic School Playbook, you share the insights of many priests, administrators, teachers, and families that have made Catholic schools work. So Denver's Our Lady of Lourdes K-8 Catholic School principal, Rosemary Vanderweel, she champions the indispensability of Catholic identity. She says, our families know our school is Catholic. This isn't a school that just teaches a religion class for 35 minutes a day. This is the air we breathe. It's a part of who we are. So Michael, to make it the air one breathes, tell us how the Mass and the liturgical life of the Church fits into the rhythm of the successful Catholic school.
Yeah, I'll give you an example from St. Jerome Institute, which is a high school that started up 7 years ago. It's an independent Catholic high school that started 7 years ago. And they integrated the Catholic faith into the entirety of their day and their curriculum. So I'll give you a few examples. They begin every day with lauds. 8 a.m., the whole school is praying together. It lasts for 10 to 15 minutes. Students go off to class. They pray at the beginning of every class together. Catholic prayer life. So you're praying the start of the day and the start of every class.
Yeah.
Every class they teach. So they have a fully integrated Catholic curriculum. Mm-hmm. Every class they teach is integrated in a number of ways, but the primary underlying way that they're integrated is through Catholic theology. Theological questions can come up in any class: math, science, humanities, art, you name it. So and then in addition to that, they do a weekly Mass, and we've seen everything from, some schools do Mass 1 day a week. I've heard of 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week. It's dependent on the school.
Right.
St. Jerome Institute also does, I think they do a half dozen feast days a year. And a feast day, so think of, I went to public school. In public school, we had field day.
Yeah.
I think we did field day twice a year. And that was a day of physical competitions outside. And it was a blast. We all had a lot of fun. So imagine that, but now take the physical competition, you do that for maybe half the day, 2 or 3 hours. And then you go off to mass, and then you break bread and have a feast together.
Mm.
And maybe all the parents are invited in, people contribute and bring lots of great food. And you're celebrating. This is liturgical life, right? So you're celebrating whatever feast day is happening at that time of the year. And then during the feast, you've got kids doing skits and all sorts of other activities that some of them are competitive and some of them are just everyone doing it together as a team. It could be poetry recitals, all sorts of things like this to celebrate the feast day. They tie it into the theme of that feast day and what they've been learning in class. And they'll do this literally. It's not a twice a year thing. I believe it's 6 days a year.
Wow.
So this is the beautiful thing about the time period that we're in. We're seeing this renewal that's really been happening in Catholic schools for around 10 to 15 years in earnest. And it's actually a period of innovation.
Yeah.
And which is beautiful. There's all sorts of opportunities to innovate, to further integrate your faith life into the school life. And there's lots of different schools that are getting really creative about this. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. There's not one school that has it figured out and everyone's following their lead. There are definitely some schools that are leading the way, such as St. Jerome Academy in Hyattsville, the pre-K to 8 school that was on the verge of going under in 2009 and went through a pretty miraculous turnaround, led by people that were in the community. And then one of the best things that they did for that school was publish. So this is like Michael Hanby, Edward Trudeau, and others. They published the curriculum that they wrote and they put it online, and they've had hundreds of parish schools across the country download it for free. And some of them have taken pretty much exactly what they've done. Others have tweaked it. And there's this beautiful movement that's been happening. And again, you're seeing lots of opportunities to innovate and do this sort of thing.
It's amazing, and I love the notion of, we think about the rhythm of the seasons that come in the liturgical year of the church, and to not have that completely amputated from a kid's daily life. And you and I both know that we have the parents, we have your parish, and we have your school. And if your school is so removed, and I'm a product of public schools myself. I have a family of public school teachers and administrators, so I think there's a lot of wonderful things that happen in public schools. But I would say that the advantage that we found over and over again in our experience with the Catholic schools was the notion that you have that rhythm of the liturgy, the liturgical year, and obviously the sacraments and the open conversation, the feast days, prayer, all these things were part of the daily rhythm of one form or the other. And, it's like the mountains, or the people that live by the sea, and they get inland, they get away from the sound of waves on the shore, and they get a little bit restless. We don't want ourselves to become spiritually restless or spiritually numb because we're increasingly removed from, again, the liturgical structure and order and forms that inform our faith life. To have that involved in the school life is pretty amazing. I made a mention just there for a second about parents. Throughout this book, Mike, you remind us that parents are the primary educators of children, and that the schools, the administrators, the priests, the board, they're all called to assist the primary educators. In a world where many expect teachers to carry that responsibility largely themselves, my kids are educated at school, what somebody thinks. Why do Catholic schools possess such a countercultural attitude on the role of parent as primary educator?
Well, this is one of the things that was beautifully spelled out in Vatican II documents, that parents are the primary educator of our children.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important. I loved how you put it earlier that, look, we're all human beings are largely formed by 3 institutions: our families, led by our parents, our parishes, led by our pastors, and our schools. And when you're at school 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, starting at, some people homeschool in the early years, but whatever, at some age, that's a lot of time spent at school.
It is.
And And to be able to live the liturgical life out, but obviously you're going to do that at your parish, at your church, but then for that to inform how you live your home life and your school life, it's so powerful. All three of these institutions, if you will, need to work together to do this. Like I know my wife has done a beautiful job of incorporating liturgical living into our home from the very beginning. And so, look, even if you start sending your kids to school at the earliest possible age, 3 or 4 years old at preschool, you're the ones who have your kids at home for their first 3 years or 5 years or however many years it is. And it's up to the mom and dad to set the daily rhythm for the house and how you're forming your children. It's up to the mom and dad to be very deliberate about how you incorporate your prayer life, your liturgical life, limitations you have on whether it's sports or screen time or all of these other things that enter into the life of your family. And, what we have found in schools that I have interviewed and schools that I've worked with, it's very clear the school leaders that really understand it, and the best school leaders, in my opinion, recognize how critical it is to work closely with parents, that they're not just receiving a handoff and they take it from there and they handle everything, though they know that they have to work closely with the parents because everyone's taking a part in forming these children. Schools can't perform. They can't. It's hard to perform miracles.
Yeah.
So you can't expect a child who's got little to no prayer life at home, who's playing video games all day, or who's on social media a lot, or is spending, 20, 30, 40 hours a week playing sports, overdoing on some areas. It's hard to expect the school to be able to do a great job with that child. The parents have to play a role. The parents have to give them the foundation to make sure that the kids are developing good life habits, that they're able to hold on to their sense of wonder, that it's not destroyed by frivolous activities, that there's lots of great books at home that kids can get lost in, and they have opportunities to further their intellectual life even outside of school. And the amount of resources available now, both in terms of books and in terms of online resources and everything, there is so much that parents can do to continue to play an active role in forming their children, not only spiritually and morally, but also intellectually. And the Catholic Church gets this. They see how important it is. So it's very important for Catholic principals to get this and to respect the role of parents, to work together with the parents, and even create opportunities for parent formation. And we've seen, you mentioned the school in Denver. That's one of the great things that school does is they have done book reading clubs for the parents. To any new parent coming on board, they'll get everyone reading a book or two together that helps to continue to invest in the parent community and form a proper community of families, which will make school go way easier. It's when parents have differing cultures at home and like different goals for their kids and priorities for their kids, that can make life so much more challenging for the schools. So again, just to reiterate, it really, really helps to have parents completely on board so everyone's on the same page, knowing the same mission.
Segment 2, The Message and the Messengers. Flannery O'Connor once lamented, quote, "Total non-retention has kept my education from being a burden to me," close quote. And Winston Churchill likewise complained, quote, "My education was interrupted only by my schooling," close quote. So obviously these are the puckish, indictments of kind of what they deem to be kind of somewhat substandard or frustrating education processes. Mike, let's talk about the pedagogy and curriculum of the thriving Catholic school. So first, you've written that, quote, the cornerstone of such excellent Catholic schools is the teaching of religion as not just one subject within the curriculum, but the key to its unity and integration, helping children find order and meaning across all disciplines and experiences. So, how can Christ serve as the axis upon which a child's education turns?
That's such a great question. So I think at the core of it, like, and so many of the educators and principals that we interviewed, groups like the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education, they get this at their core, and no one can articulate it as beautifully as they can. But knowing that everything, when we're being formed in the entirety of our education, everything comes back to first principles and sort of the first order questions that we all have about who we are, where we came from, why we exist. And at the core of all of that is God. And it's, Christ as the Logos, the marriage of faith and reason.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that at the core, then we're missing out on the most fundamental, important part of reality. So I think that has to be the first principle, and the overriding theme, if you will, of any Catholic school. Because otherwise, we're falling into the trap that everyone going to public schools has fallen into, and that must be avoided.
Robert Frost once declared, "I am not a teacher, but an awakener." Let's talk about the method of discussion that brings this material alive to children with a tendency to get either bored or restless. So how does one speak about what you just mentioned, which are the permanent things, if you will, the transcendentals, if you will? How does one, as a teacher, who there's such a special place in heaven for the good teachers out there, how do they keep kids engaged? What's an approach to discussing these things from your perspective to keep the fire alive?
Yeah, and another way of asking that question is, how do we make sure we are continuously cultivating wonder in our children?
Yeah.
Because I really do believe it's certainly the big discovery for me, and it's what got me interested in this is, look, I viewed pretty much my entire kindergarten through 12th grade experience into college as a wonder-killing experience. And we are born in wonder.
Yeah.
So it's not like we need to impart wonder on our children. We're born with wonder. You watch any baby and toddler, and we're all full of wonder at that age. It's the way we are created. But going to school ends up killing that in most of us. So I empathize with the quotes that you provided earlier from Flannery O'Connor and Winston Churchill. And so it's led a lot of education reformers to question so much about school to begin with. And so you'll see a lot of progressive schools that abandon so much of the classroom and traditional pedagogy and so much of the school experience, because they have such bad memories of school. Like what I just described as school as a wonder-killing experience, I think it's a pretty common experience.
Yeah.
I think that resonates. When I talk to most people, I think I'm Gen X, but I think this goes cross-generational. Most people don't have great memories of school cultivating their wonder.
Yeah.
So for me, and so I could have gone in that direction, but what saved me was, in my 20s, I regained my sense of wonder, and I largely regained it through reading. And I read lots of bad books and lots of good books, but it was largely through reading, and also going back and coursework or lectures that were amazing and beautiful.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were discussions as well. So if you sit through some of there are amazing lectures that are out there. That's a really high bar. But even better, there's nothing like sitting in a seminar, a well-run discussion led by a teacher about a great book, and walking away from that realizing, oh my goodness, I read that book twice to prepare for that discussion, and I just walked out of that discussion with 10 times more insights about that book that I never would have acquired on my own. So I think we need to accept the challenge in school of how do we go back and make sure that we have this, we create a wonder cultivating experience and instead of a wonder killing experience. So I think there's a number of common themes when you look at some of these schools in terms of how they do this. But so first of all, I think you need to start with the importance of wonder, and you need to be very deliberate about that. And the schools. So I'll touch on. I think it's a little bit different in sort of the kindergarten to 8 world than in the high school world. So I'll first touch on the kindergarten to 8 world, and I think it's actually one theme that I have found to be a typical problem actually across all grade levels is. And we homeschool our kids for the younger grades, and this is it's something. And I'm our homeschool math teacher.
Okay.
And it's something that I've tried to incorporate as the math teacher, and that is a common problem. Is teachers give the answer away too quickly, and it's beautiful to watch students ponder a challenge or a problem or anything and try to come up with a solution.
Sure.
So, I'll give a simple example. I teach arithmetic to our kids. I've never told any of our kids how to add fractions with uncommon denominators. I made them all figure it out themselves. They knew what the problem was. They got really good at adding fractions with common denominators. And then as soon as we went to ones with uncommon denominators, they would get stuck, but they would have manipulatives, the fraction manipulatives. And with those manipulatives, they would eventually figure out how to do it, the idea of creating a common denominator. But I never told it to them. It was guided discovery. So that's something that and I could give you plenty of other examples within the world of arithmetic and math that I do with our kids. And that to me is discovering something and figuring it out is way more interesting than simply being told how to do it.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important principle. So in so much of the subject, it certainly applies to the world of science. And it could be applied to literature and the books that we're reading and asking, it's all about asking the right questions, right? Yeah. When a child is reading a book, you're doing as a read aloud, you stop and you ask your kid the question, why do you think that character just did what he did? That sort of questioning and getting kids thinking about things in a new way, I think that should be the constant goal, the constant challenge we have as teachers is to get them eventually thinking about some of these greater questions. And then as they get older, they move on into high school is where you get so pedagogically, I could not be a bigger fan of the seminar method. It is an engaging, from my experience and talking with lots of other schools and now sitting in lots of seminars and lectures, it's active learning. It's so much more engaging, and you get students to vocalize things. And as has been pointed out to me many times by experienced headmasters and teachers, you don't quite learn something until you're vocalizing it. There's an importance of vocalizing something. And too many classrooms in high school are sitting there listening to lectures, taking notes, and it's very passive learning.
Yeah.
So I think pedagogy matters. I think content matters. Again, so much, whether it's history, literature, science, math, music, you name it. There are so many interesting patterns to be discovered, interesting sequences in history to be discovered. I'll just give another example. One of the favorite conversations I like having I've had some with my own kids as a homeschool parent, but is suitable for the classroom, would be this whole, especially now we're hearing about, wow, there are real flat earthers out there, right? There are people that believe in a flat earth world. Like, how is this possible in the 21st century? But to be honest, when you walk around the world, it feels flat, right? So it feels flat. So how do we know that it's round? And of course, we know that it's round. If anyone who's flown on an airplane or has seen pictures of the Earth from satellites or whatever, well, okay, now we all know. But we've actually known the Earth is round since at least back to the time of Aristotle, because he wrote about the 3 pieces of evidence that we have the Earth is round 2,500 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's such a fun exercise to ask kids, guys, before we had cars and planes, satellites, any of this stuff, we knew. So when you ask a kid today, how do you know the Earth is round? And they might just rightly say, oh, well, Dad, don't you remember when we flew over here and saw the horizon, or whatever, or we've seen pictures. And most of them, they would say, well, we've seen pictures of the Earth, or we have the globe over here, and whatever. So they'll use modern evidence. But then when you challenge them to think, okay, so how would humans have figured this out over 2,000 years ago? Yeah. It's really fascinating to think about that, and then it gets them thinking and observing and taking on the world in a whole new way. And I think the more we could be doing exercises like that with our children to bring this stuff alive. So, and the beauty of a seminar class is you'll often open with a question about the book or whatever, and then it just goes from there, and you unearth these things in the discussion. But as opposed to a lecture where the teacher is not struggling.
Yeah.
The teacher knows all the material, is delivering you all the material, and you have to be a sponge there and absorb it. Whereas in a discussion, everyone's struggling with this to different degrees or another, and that's capturing your own struggle and then we learn through that. And that's, so I think there is content, pedagogy, overall philosophy of how we learn are different ways to sort of cultivate this sense of wonder to get at the heart of what you're talking about.
I think you also kind of captured this when you talked about how much you've rediscovered the love of learning in your later portions of life when you just were reading. And I think I'm the same way, is that I somehow sidestepped reading some of the greatest works of literature during the course of my college career. I was so focused on medicine that I was like, I just need to be so science heavy that I spent the rest of my life thus far reading the Greek tragedies or Shakespeare or Dante or things of that nature. And there is an absolute exhilaration in epiphany, in the notion of, like you said, discovery. And T.S. Eliot in the Courses on the Rock basically says, where's the wisdom lost in knowledge? Where's the knowledge lost in information? And as you've said, how much information is imparted to kids, to people day in and day out. They passively receive it. We open up our phone, we look something up, information. And yet not even a subset of that. I mean, a very small subset of that is actually knowledge in our brains. And that knowledge in our brains, unless it's chastened by wisdom or chastened by judgment experience, is not converted to wisdom. And to your point, if you're sitting down and all you're doing is scrolling down stuff and then you're memorizing and you're purging it onto the test for getting a subsection and moving on to something else. Somehow, somewhere that information's in your marrow. But do you know how to, in a wise fashion, manipulate that, turn it over, look at it in your mind, and think critically for when the moment arises that you have to employ that? And so, to my way of thinking, that on the spot seminar, back and forth, conversational, nuanced, kind of nimble logic that's going back and forth, it's pushing us to be wise and not simply just to be smart with our information. Is that fair to say?
I think it's very fair to say. And to your point about classic texts, look, I was the same way. I didn't read any of the classics really growing up. In high school, I read maybe a few of the, of what might consider sort of American classics, but I didn't read. I never read Augustine's Confessions until 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's a crime. I'm 52 years old. That's an absolute crime. I'm a practicing Catholic. Yeah. I was baptized and confirmed. I was raised Catholic. Typical 1980s, kind of lukewarm, went to mass every Sunday, confession once or twice a year, said grace before dinner, and not much more than that. So I didn't really come, my sort of intellectual and spiritual awakening happened together in sort of my mid-20s, and I've been playing a lot of catch up since then. But I missed all these books. So I have been playing catch up all of this time. So I get a lot of parents mentioning, well, do you think you would have valued reading these books when you were in high school? And the answer is yes, absolutely. These works. So first of all, there are some books that a lot of these books, no one will ever get to unless they're really sort of, geeking out over time as they go on, like getting someone to read Aristotle. Like I later pursued a philosophy degree, which is what got me to read Nicomachean Ethics. But no one should die before reading Aristotle's Ethics. Yeah. Or Plato's Dialogues. These are books. I think of Jane Austen. Mm-hmm. I reading some of Jane Austen's books are like, wow, I should have read that before I even got married. I should have read that when I was dating. Yeah. Right. No kidding. I didn't have any sisters, and maybe I would have understand the female psyche a little bit better. And, I had to get married and have a couple of daughters before I started to really, truly understand women. But man, if I had read Jane Austen, that would have helped a little bit. Yeah. But there's so much wisdom. And I mean, look, the Western canon, these books, there's so much wisdom baked into these. And this is one of the saddest parts of so many Catholic schools today. You look at what these kids are reading. Yeah. I get parents. So, since publishing this book with Word on Fire a year ago, I get, friends of mine and other parents that will reach out to me and discuss some of this stuff. And they'll talk about the challenges they're having with their own parish schools. And we're talking elementary school and high school. Yeah. And when you're reading 6th grade and you're reading books not picked out by the pastor or principal, but whatever the book du jour that English teacher wanted to bring into the classroom setting. And many of these books are hyper politicized and completely inappropriate for 6th graders, but it satisfies the ideological goals of that 6th grade English teacher. And that's what these kids are reading. And I don't know what's worse. The fact that they're reading books that are just simply inappropriate for 12, 13-year-olds to be reading, or the opportunity cost. Because for every time they're reading the woke leftist ideological book that was published 10 or 20 years ago, they're not reading the beautiful classic written 70 years ago or 150 years ago. That's totally kid appropriate. That is a beautiful story. And that is a classic. And that would be the right time to read that book so that they have that as part of their memory bank for the rest of their lives. So these kids are being robbed, and who do you blame this on? And I think it's important to note that we all deserve some of the blame for this.
Mm.
Certainly the pastor and the principal, they probably deserve the most blame. They're the ones in charge of the school. The principal is the one leading the show, hired by the pastor. So they've got to take responsibility for all the books that their kids are reading. But it's also a failure on, at every level. At the end of the day, the bishop and superintendent could have more oversight on this to make sure that we're not reading these ideological books really at any point. I mean, it's indoctrination that's happening, but I would also blame the parent community. Look, most bishops, like our Bishop Burbage here in Arlington Diocese, very responsive to the people, to the pastors. And I realize not every bishop is, but I got to think lots of bishops are.
Mm-hmm.
Parents need to speak up because, look, bishops are busy. The superintendent's busy. They have a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to catch every bad book, every indoctrinating book being taught at every school in their diocese. Parents need to speak up. Parents need to know what books their kids are. And I'm picking on books right now, but there's lots of things parents can do.
Sure.
But just picking on the book theme, every parent is the first educator of their child. Mm-hmm. Every parent should know exactly and should find out at the start of the school year. In fact, they should know going before they even enroll their kid in a school. Hey, I'd like to see what the book list is.
Yeah.
What are all the books that we're reading this year? And ideally, they've read most of them. Ideally, they are classics that they once read. And if they're not, they should be looking into, okay, well, when was this book published? And just a quick shortcut rule is if it's been published in the last 50 years, you should be aware. Because A, there's a good chance it's very ideological. And B, it seems like an utter waste of time that the book hasn't stood the test of time yet. So there are so many great books published more than 50 years ago. So we should be biased towards those books. They've stood the test of time. They're classics. They're now ingrained in culture. It's a gift to pass on our culture to our children. But every parent should be aware of every book that's being read. If they're not aware of it, they could go ahead and read it. And I know parents who do this, who go and read the books. They know what's in it, so they can talk about their kids with it if they read it. And keep in mind, look, most schools only read a few books per semester. Yeah. This is not like most schools aren't reading a book a week.
Yeah.
It's not that heavy of a lift. Moms and dads could divide the work, but this is the sort of thing. And if you find out your school has these books on their book list, you should be raising that complaint. Go up the chain. Start with the principal. Maybe even start with the teacher. But it's got to get to the teacher, and then to the principal, and then to the pastor. It's got to go to all three of those. And then ideally, if nothing's being done about it quickly, then I would just make sure that the bishop and superintendent are aware of what's going on. Because the more parents they hear from, a lot of them need that. It's so much easier to take action when you've got 10 or 20 or 30 parents complaining about something than when it's just one or two.
Yeah.
So parents don't realize how much influence they have and how much opportunity they have to affect change in that regard. So I put this out to all parents is like, look, you've basically hired the school to help form your child. Make sure you know everything that's going on at that school. And a book list is a good place to start.
Mike, in the Catholic School Playbook, you write, quote, "A great teacher knows Jesus Christ personally, and this inspires a desire within the teacher to continually come to know him better and to take seriously the obligation to shepherd his or her students into a deeper relationship with Christ. The great teacher is also intellectually curious, capable of experiencing wonder, and keenly aware of the dignity of the children in the classroom." Now, again, I'm blessed that I've known a lot of teachers like this in my kids' classrooms. I also know that they're difficult to find, these type of outstanding teachers that really carry their faith and convey that faith in their teaching. What do you say to schools about how you find these teachers, and how you let's ask three questions: how you find them, how you retain them, and then also how you keep the flame alive once they're in the trenches of day in and day out teaching?
Love this question. It's so important. So look, teachers model humility. They model wonder. And when you have a teacher who is on fire for the faith and on fire for learning in general, that is infectious. So that's who you want teaching your child, is someone whose sense of wonder is on fire, who is very humble, who is willing to say, I don't know the answer to something, and look it up and get back to a student. So I think all of this is really, really important. And the good news is it's way easier to find these teachers now than it was when I was a kid going to school in the 80s. There is a renewal happening within the Catholic Church. Look, Word on Fire is a big part of this renewal. There are many great Catholic colleges that have amazing liberal arts programs. I think of schools like Thomas Aquinas College, Wyoming Catholic College, University of Dallas, that are giving their college students amazing educations. So they can be a great source, but it's not even just like those would be some of the Newman Guide colleges, right? But it's not just the Newman Guide colleges. I have a son who's at Notre Dame, and there's a great faithfully Catholic community subculture at Notre Dame, right? Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. But it's not just Notre Dame. So one of the greatest apostolates of my adulthood is Focus. And Focus, I think there are, I don't know, probably 200 colleges that have Focus chapters. And so you've got Focus, you've got Thomistic Institute, you've got, I think it's called St. Paul's Outreach. You've got a number of these ministries that there are most colleges, not all colleges, but most colleges, certainly most of the bigger state colleges, have great Catholic communities there. So I think where do you find these people? So obviously, number one, we have to find teachers whose faith is on fire.
Yeah.
There can't be an exception to that.
Yeah.
But number two, it's really important to look at. So what did they study in college? If you're hiring someone right out of college, what they studied matters. So what do we want them to study in college? It's not the education major. So, and that's actually, when we look at the beginning of our conversation, spoke about, well, what happened to Catholic schools? And we talk a little bit about how they followed public schools, down a certain path. Part of that path was all the education schools that are out there and what's being taught at education schools. And so, what we have seen from one of the things that these schools have in common, these really great schools, is they actually consider an education major to be a bit of a red flag. It's not, it is a minus. So in fact, for a lot of schools, as soon as they see you're an education major, they'll pretty much write you off. What they want to see is that you had ideally a broad liberal arts education in college. So great majors would be these broad subjects that tap into the liberal arts. So it could be literature, philosophy, history, theology, math, even physics. Look, the liberal arts includes, arithmetic, astronomy. So really math and physics. So these are such broad subjects. So hiring people from who were serious Catholics in college that studied something very broad, but then once you hire them, you need to Like they don't know how to teach yet. So they have to have the right characteristics that could make a good teacher. And then you need to develop them. And there's a lot, like the schools that are doing the best job, the hardest work is really creating the culture. And I hate to use a corporate phrase like best practices, but I'll use best practices, right? The schools that are doing it right are doing an amazing job of training and developing their teachers. I mentioned St. Jerome Institute before. They're one of the ones that I think they do it best. New teachers, in addition to getting a summer program of 2 or 3 weeks of an introduction, but you're going to get you'll have a coach assigned to you, a master teacher who will sit with you, weekly or biweekly and shadow you in the classroom, and then give you coaching and feedback later that day. This is stolen right out of the sort of corporate playbook when you hire sales and client service people who get coaching from their managers. You're coaching your teachers. Can you ever remember being in school when you were younger when a teacher was being shadowed by a master teacher?
No.
I have no memory of ever seeing that, right? A teacher was alone. There was only the teacher. They may have had an assistant teacher.
Yeah.
But there was no master teacher who would then give them coaching later on. I've never witnessed that as a student. So it's a very uncommon practice. But these are the sorts of things that you need to do. You need to recruit these teachers well, and then you need to train them well once you get them in the door. But again, I think it's much easier now to find teachers whose faith is on fire, because then the other reason you need to clearly differentiate your school and make it clear that you are authentically Catholic and you're doing everything you can to incorporate your Catholic identity into your school, is that not only will that make it more attractive to a growing number of parents, but it will also differentiate you and help you to reach the kinds of teachers that you're trying to reach. Because a lot of those teachers, they don't want to go to the watered down Catholic school that's out there. And look, let's be real. Most Catholic schools are still kind of watered down. And so they will have a harder time attracting the student who went to Thomas Aquinas College, got a great books education, maybe later on went to Augustine Institute and did their master's in Catholic education. Like this would be your sort of dream student, right?
Yeah.
So assuming they're also humble and have these also other right traits, which isn't everyone. But those students who are doing all the right things, they are looking for Catholic school opportunities like what we're describing. They don't want to go to the watered down Catholic school where they won't have support, where only half the teachers are really practicing their faith and there's not a great culture or whatever. So it actually, when you double down on your Catholic identity, it actually makes it easier to go out and hire some of these great teachers.
It's interesting, and it comes right back to the notion of what we were talking about before. When schools actually embrace their Catholic identity, it also is, like we said, it's good for business. To what you're saying also, because there's so many families that are hungry not to go to a private, watered down, kind of quote unquote Catholic and name only school. They want to go to a Catholic school, and when that school does embrace it, boom, they go there. And what you're saying is, on every level, good administrators, good and faithful teachers, families that are dedicated to growing their kids in their faith or bringing what they have as parents to the school. It all kind of comes together. I mean, it seems to be the paradox of the notion of Catholic education, and that is good Catholic education ultimately. It draws people in. And it doesn't mean that some schools in some areas don't encounter financial troubles and there's other issues. I mean, we get it. Good schools still close. We understand that. But as I'm hearing what you're saying, when the fire is alive, it draws other people to the fire.
It does. And it does it in two ways. So think of like concentric circles here. So the innermost concentric circle you're going to draw in the serious, like the Catholic families who really take their faith seriously. They're the ones who are going to be most drawn to it at first. They're looking for schools like this.
Yeah.
And many of them are opting out of school to homeschool instead because they couldn't find it. So they'll do whatever it takes. And if that means homeschooling, they'll do it. So you're attracting them first, and they become your your core, and they help set the foundation and culture of your school, along with the teachers and the administrators. But in the outer concentric circle, it will attract other people, sometimes who aren't even Catholic.
Yeah.
But other people who maybe are Catholic, but maybe they're not putting God number one.
Yeah.
They're still very much on the path. They need to be further evangelized or catechized or whatever. But what it draws them to these schools is they see that these children are on fire for learning.
Yeah.
And they're like, wonder is being cultivated in those children. Those children actually are enjoying school, not just recess, not just playing with their friends, but they're coming home and talking about what they're learning at school and how joyful it is and how interesting it is. So their friends and 1 or 2 degrees away from them are seeing that. And they're like, where do your kids go to school?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are your kids getting that? And other parents, again, ones who maybe not as far along on the faith path, look at that and like, oh my gosh, I'd like that for my kids.
Yeah.
Can my kids go there? And then what happens? Those, for some of not all those families, but for some of those families, those kids come home and they actually start evangelizing and forming their own parents.
Yeah.
And so you see a lot of this. You see a lot of parents whose Catholic faith is renewed because of what's happening at their children's school. And their kids come home with it. They're seeing it come alive in the rest of the parent community. And so this is where, Bishop Barron does such a great job in communicating this as, a Catholic school's primary job is to evangelize.
Yeah.
And this is how it can happen. But it happens best when a school is all in on it and attracts a core of families who want that, who are actively looking for that.
So before we go to the next segment, I think this is such an important question to ask. The downfall of certain schools, Catholic schools, is the poisoning of the well by bad teachers, by sort of mission blind administrators, dysfunctional families. I'm not talking about families that have complications and so on, but I mean ones that end up being very meddlesome or being very kind of pulling the mission away. It's just dysfunction. That's a reality in all schools across the board, Catholic, non-Catholic, private, public schools, and so on. What is the special charge of the Catholic school administrator or priest or overseers and or teachers when there's dysfunction on one of those levels in correcting it?
That's why clarity of mission is so important. And again, this would apply to any sort of institution, a for-profit, a nonprofit, but in the instance of a Catholic school, that dysfunction can arise. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it happens all the time. And that's why it's really, really important I'll keep using the example of the pastor and principal, because that is the majority of Catholic schools.
Yeah.
There are plenty, there's a growing number of independent Catholic schools that have their own board, and those boards are often amazing Catholics, and they're, whatever. So it's the more common scenario where you have a pastor and a principal. It's why mission matters so much, and not just mission, but clarity of your mission, of what you're and how and even to some degree how you're going to accomplish that mission. And most pastors don't want to be overly prescriptive. Mm-hmm. Most pastors don't want to be overly involved, and I get that. The pastor has a lot going on.
Yeah,
and I get that, but I'm not sure there's any more important mission at a church than the school. If there is a parish school, it's probably the most important one. And so a pastor can't neglect his duty to make sure that there's a beautiful vision for that school that is authentically Catholic to the core, and that mission is being executed on. And that means some basic oversight of the curriculum. Like, look, every curriculum, the curriculum, the reading list, everything, it should be published on the school website.
Yeah.
It's one of the things we look at most of these great schools. It's all published on their website. They're not shy about anything. They're proud of it. So they're gonna give you a course description and a reading list broken down by grade. So a pastor should have insight into that, and everything that follows in the curriculum and the principal that he hires to run the school, clarity on that mission, agreement on that mission, and at least roughly how we're going to execute on that and how that plays into the culture, the curriculum, and the hiring of teachers.
Yeah.
All of this is essential so that if a teacher goes astray, then you can either quickly rein them in or you have easy grounds for dismissal because they went off track. And this becomes a big challenge because, look, let's be clear, for so many parish schools, that becomes a challenge of when you realize, oh boy, our seventh grade English teacher kind of went off the rails, but she's a popular teacher.
Yeah.
So the parents like her, the students like her. She's generally good and she's engaging with the students, but hey, she's bringing in her own ideologies and her own sort of agenda. This is a problem. It's going to be harder to fire that person if you're not being clear with everyone, from the principal to the parents, about what your mission is and what you're trying to accomplish. And some, it helps to be a little eloquent, when you're talking. Like, I would think every pastor would want to talk to the parent community at the beginning of every year and what you're trying to accomplish and what you're looking for, and that you're not there to indoctrinate. No one's there to indoctrinate your children. We're there to help form your children in faith and in reason. And here's generally how we're doing that. And so I think it's got to be, the pastor's got to make sure there's great clarity, and they've got to make sure they hire a great, strong principal who knows how to execute on all of this and make it happen, so that you can deal with these instances that come up along the way.
And what I appreciate about the book when you're writing about this, because I really feel like it's head on, it recognizes, when we've touched on some of these other things about the role of the Mass, about a liturgical rhythm that the school follows, about prayer making its way woven through the day and so on. It seems that to cultivate a culture of faith and to have a sensible, meaningful and faithful pedagogy and content list, and then recruiting and mentoring and supporting people, the teachers you have and so on, by all those proactive steps of, again, being willing the good of the other, from the hierarchy down, colleague to colleague, parent to staff, all that kind of stuff. The hope is to mitigate or to minimize and then mitigate the risk of these things happening. Now, human beings being as we are, we bring our dysfunction with us. And so you can do everything right and still, a bomb goes off. I mean, figuratively, like a dysfunction bomb goes off, and you're trying to figure out how to clear through the wreckage and all this. So your book does a very nice job of saying, a lot of the approach to these schools is to create an environment that doesn't take its eye off the ball and builds in such a way that you minimize risks for things going sideways. But we always know, because of the human condition, that's the fly in the ointment. We're all fallible. The things can go sideways. And if so, here's kind of a way to go about it. But I think it's a very honest part of the book to say what these things need to be addressed. And as a result, let's address them. Is that anything you would add before we move on to the next segment on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's real. It's realistic. Look, there's no perfect school.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because it's a bunch of human beings that are there leading the show, and we all make mistakes. There's no perfect school. There's no perfect teacher or head of school or any of these things. So we have to allow some margin of error, and then have the right sort of practices and guardrails in place for when things do go wrong. Because things will go wrong from time to time. So it's all about having those right structures in place to be able to react to that, to fix it as quickly as possible, because that's part of it. Schools don't have forever to fix something, because guess what? These students only get one shot at fifth grade.
Yeah.
And time goes on. And so you can't take years to fix a problem. When you realize there's a problem, you need to do everything you can to fix it as quickly as possible.
Hi, I'm Tod Worner, Managing Editor of Evangelization Culture, the journal of the Word on Fire Institute. Word on Fire is a global evangelical community that exists to provide our members with the resources they need to proclaim Christ to a secular culture. Our award-winning quarterly journal, Evangelization Culture, is offered exclusively to Word on Fire Institute members. It's a tangible representation of our mission and goal to lead with beauty in order to bring others to the knowledge of truth. Inside each issue, you'll find writing from premier scholars and inspiring pieces on literature, culture, and daily life from fellow missionaries on the journey to know and serve Christ. Get a copy of the current issue of the Evangelization Culture Journal for free by visiting wordonfire.org/journal. Thank you, and join us in bringing Christ to a hungry culture. Segment 3, The Finishing Touches. In the opening lines to Anna Karenina, Leo Tolstoy writes, quote, "All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way," close quote. So, Mike, in a question attributed to a Yale academic, quote, "If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions," close quote. Cyril Cruz, the principal of Holy Innocents Parish School in Long Beach, California, in your book, asks 4 questions of families in the interview process to see if they would be a good fit for their Catholic school. Number 1, why do you want your child to be formed at our school? Number 2, how do you practice your faith? Number 3, describe your family life with respect to discipline, scheduling, etc. And number 4, what is your philosophy on technology? So, Mike, very important questions to include in this book, the Catholic School Playbook. Say a little bit about the spirit of these questions and why they matter.
All of these questions help to unearth what matters most to parents, what their first principles are, and what the ultimate goals are for their children. If a school, if parents, a family, and the school are not aligned on these things, that is what inevitably leads to trouble. And I think I love the fact that a lot of these great schools don't just interview the student, they interview the families. Because if a family wants X and the school is driving towards Y, that family should never go to this school. Now, the beautiful part of it is a lot of parents just haven't been as thoughtful about it. And so a lot of from what I hear from heads of school is that there are times during these family interviews that lead to real conversation and a bit of a little bit of an awakening on the side of parents, because a lot of parents haven't been as deliberate about asking these questions or living their faith lives as they should have been. But I think that's like fundamentally, if you get parents and schools on the same page for goals and mission alignment, that's going to deal with, that's 95% of it right there. Because then you've got, now you've got parents who come in. Parents need to trust the school leadership.
Yeah.
You need to start, any relationship must be built on trust. And that we're all valuing the same thing and wanting the same thing for our children. And so much of this comes back to trusting the head of school, trusting the administration, trusting the teachers. And that trust works both ways. And so I think it's really great to have this sort of dialogue early on in the conversation to make sure that there's great alignment on this.
Yeah. Mike, you spend some time talking about the notion of overseers, parish, diocese, board of directors, where that's applicable in a Catholic school. So what role do they play? And then what role does kind of the notion of subsidiarity play in the operation of a good Catholic school?
Yeah, the most important role. So a head of school is generally hired, unless that head of school happens to start an independent school. But generally speaking, for the vast majority of schools, even most independent schools, because independent schools often will go out and then hire a head of school to run it. But the most important job of the overseer of the principal, which is usually the pastor. If it's a diocesan school, it's often the superintendent. If it's an independent school, it's a governing board. Most important job is hiring that head of school. So, and in order to hire the right person, again, not to beat a dead horse, it comes back to vision, mission. So you're trying to hire someone who not only, so first and foremost, buys into your vision and mission, which means their faith has got to be on fire, right? So it starts with that and flows down into everything we've been discussing. But also someone who you believe can execute on it. Because there's one thing to have a vision for something, and it's another thing to be able to execute on it. And by executing on it, I really mean, there's a number of things that go into that. It's putting together the right curriculum. But again, I would say the number one thing, it's curriculum, it's culture, but the number one thing is hiring. That you can hire a head of school that knows how to recruit and develop the right talent, primarily in teachers, but also in the rest of their administration, depending on how big the school is. So I would say generally that the board or the pastor, whoever is hiring that principal, will delegate the running of the school. It's the principal's job. It's the headmaster's job to run the school, and they have the mandate and the freedom to do it. And there's regular check-ins to make sure that we're staying the course. But it's the head of school's job to run the school. So they're in charge. Something goes wrong, the buck should stop with the head of school.
Yeah.
And the board is there to help. The board, there's a lot. The number one. So after hiring, this is just like any nonprofit, right? The two most important things that board members do is hire. Well, again, making sure that whatever the mission is, that it's clear. We have clarity of mission. Number one. Number two, we hire tied to that mission. We hire the head of school. And number three, just like any other nonprofit, they should be helping with fundraising. Because most private schools, certainly most Catholic schools, are not going to get all the money they need to cover all their expenses from tuition.
Yeah.
That there will be fundraising, and ideally you've got members of the board or the pastor who can go out there and promote the school to the right families, and do the relationship building to help others see the importance of this mission. And that especially if you're part of the parish, that if you're part of the parish, that you're going out there and doing it, recruiting people, selling the vision on the school, and doing all of that properly.
Yeah, very good. Michael, I wanted to ask you, finances is an important chapter. You alluded to that with fundraising, obviously. It's an important chapter in the Catholic School Playbook. Just what are some of the high points you'd like people to take away from the healthy, sensible, and, if possible, thriving finances of a Catholic school?
Yeah, it's hard. It's one of the biggest challenges of every school. No question. So, we are living in an age right now, the last few years, where school choice has finally taken off. And we've got 15 to 20 states that have great school choice plans. So I live in the state of Virginia. We do not. We're mediocre on school choice. We do not have an ESA program. There's certainly no universal ESA. But we have neighboring states who have now adopted it. West Virginia, North Carolina, lots of the southern states. Florida is probably the best state on this. Florida might be the only state where Catholic school enrollment is actually growing. And school choice is a huge part of that. There's a superintendent, I believe, in the Venice diocese who does an amazing job of promoting the universal ESA program to all the Catholics in their diocese. And it's great. I mean, it's like $9,000 or $10,000 of the sales and property taxes you are paying comes right back to you to fund your child to go to Catholic school. It's an amazing gift. So I think my number one point I'd like to make is I think school choice possibly should be the number one political issue, certainly at the state level, for every practicing Catholic in America. Is greater school choice programs. Universal ESAs are the most popular one, and you should be fighting for that. And if you're not in one of we've had about, I think, 15 or so states go live with universal ESAs. By universal, I mean everyone is eligible for it, regardless of income level. And that means, generally ranging from $6,000 to $10,000 per child that you can then take and give to any private school of your choice.
Yeah.
So we should all be pushing on it. It should be the number one issue in Virginia and every state. There are 30, 35 states that have little to nothing in terms of this. And that's really, really helpful. And, and I think, as I mentioned before, we need to make sure that our boards, our parishes, everyone sees the importance of supporting great Catholic schools. It should be a part of our ministry. Not everyone can afford it. And we want our teachers to be able to live off of the salaries that they make.
Yeah.
So we don't want to cut every cost to the bare bone. Our teachers are performing an amazing service for our communities, and too many teachers are underpaid.
Mm-hmm.
So we need we need to be able to charge enough tuition and raise the difference in fundraising to pay our teachers, reasonable and competitive salaries, so we can give them the opportunity to make this their profession. I think it's an amazing, for a college student who was well educated and got a broad liberal arts education, I think it's a great act of service for those of them who feel called to teaching, but know they want to make more money later on. Maybe they want to go into the business world or whatever. I think it's an amazing service for them to take 2 to 3 years after college to go teach. And then for those that have a real gift for it, if we can entice them to make a career out of it, but they've got to be able to make enough money to be able to support a family, because many of them want to go on and become, moms and dads. So we've got to be able to do that. So, those are the things that I would stress is we need to all be promoting school choice as much as possible, to give as many Catholic families the opportunity as possible to go send their kids to Catholic school, because it is expensive. Most families simply can't afford to spend K to 8. The cost to educate a child is, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 per kid.
Yeah.
At the high school level, that grows to $15,000 or more. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And most families can't afford it. So it's, how do you fundraise and how do you promote school choice? And how do you get every family to realize how important that issue is at the local level, so we can make sure we elect politicians that will push forward that legislation?
Mike, last question. Well, you've been wonderfully generous with your time, and I want to be respectful of that. First of all, just to reiterate, it's a wonderful book, the Catholic School Playbook. It's just it's very practical, but it also gets into the spirit behind why Catholic education matters. What made you so interested in this? What spurred you to care so deeply about the health and well-being of Catholic schools?
So thanks for that question. I would say two things. First, my own intellectual and spiritual journey. When I look back at what happened to me in my mid-20s, both in my faith life and in my intellectual life, both were weak. I was lukewarm. And it was people and books. Simply put, it was fellowship and formation that turned me to look in a slightly different direction, and it has made all the difference in my life, and seeking truth, goodness, and beauty in all that I do, and it's been transformational for me, and I mean this in all regards. It's affected me as a spouse, as a father. It impacted my career. I think it was a renewed sense of wonder that helped me to even see the business idea that I had back when I was 26 to start my company. And reading classics, my favorite books are, range from The Count of Monte Cristo to Augustine's Confessions. These are life-changing books.
Yeah.
When you read them, and it's changed. All this has had a huge impact on my own life, and that caused me to reflect back on the education I received and the education that we would then impart to our own children, informing our children. So, and my wife accompanied me on a lot of this. In fact, so she's our main homeschool teacher. When she was reading, so we homeschool our kids into middle school.
Okay.
And then send them to school. And when she was researching homeschool curricula, she was finding all these approaches that really emphasized the classics. They emphasized the liberal arts. And she had not been formed in this. She went to Catholic school, kindergarten through 12th grade, but she had not been formed in this way. Sure. This is all new stuff to her. And so we were examining all this together. And as we were going through a lot of these materials, I could not help but think, oh my goodness. Like when I fell in love with Plato's Apology, Plato's Dialogues had a huge impact on me in my mid to late 20s and helped me to fall in love with philosophy. When I read through a lot of these curricula, I realized this is how I should have been formed. This should have been the prelude to me before I ever got to reading Plato's Dialogues and reading lots of these great books. And I missed out on that. So, but when we saw that was sort of our entree into this world. And by the grace of God, I've met amazing people over the last 20 years that have inspired, our thinking on this and how we think about, school and where we would send our kids. So that was the first part of it for me as to how I got passionate about this. But then the second part became taking that experience. And then later, when I sold my tech company and started a charitable foundation and thinking through what sort of causes that we would support, Catholic education became the natural extension of that. And pretty much all the causes that we support now are related to this idea of fellowship and formation,
Wow.
people and books,
Wow.
and wanting to give this gift because we believe so many of the problems that we have in our society, if you go upstream of those problems to see what are the root causes of those problems, it's how we are formed. And so when you look at how we are formed, who forms us, as to the point that you had made earlier, we discussed a little bit, it's our families, it's our schools, and it's our churches.
Yep.
So if we can get our families, schools, and churches right, then all of this stuff happening downstream, by the time we get to the next generation, a lot of this should be cleaned up. And when I looked at those three, family, school, and churches, I think like we've done work in all three, but my passion really is more on the school side. So it's where God has led me, and I never would have expected this, years ago, because again, I'm a product of public school. I'm a Gen Xer, never gave any of this thought growing up. But I truly believe it's been providential. God has led me here when, we first started interviewing all these schools because he wanted to highlight the great things they were doing on our website, CatholicSchoolPlaybook.com. Someone at Word on Fire got wind of that and saw that, and Word on Fire reaches out to me to publish the book. That has led to lots of other opportunities to come speak to school leaders and others. It led to EWTN has done a few episodes that cover some of the material in Catholic School Playbook. So we're reaching a TV audience, and it's been a real blessing and a real privilege to be able to work in this world.
Michael Ortner, Catholic, educator, and author of the Catholic School Playbook. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, Todd. It's been a real pleasure.
So I've been thinking, when I was on the school advisory council for my daughter's parish elementary school, there was a lot of talk about ways to build enrollment, pay teachers more, purchase cutting-edge technology, refurbish the gym and classrooms, even increase STEM offerings, among others. Now, while all these ideas are sound, there was one that dawned on me and that no one was really talking about, an idea that came back to me again and again. We should strive to specialize in Catholic immersion. A Catholic immersion school, you may wonder, what on earth is that? Well, it's little more than a school that embraces its Catholic identity through prayer, partaking in the sacraments, cultivating virtue, enacting the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, and deeply engaging and vigorously learning all disciplines through the lens of a Catholic sensibility. A Catholic immersion school is little more than everything that forms a child into a follower of Christ. Now, in having my conversation with Michael Ortner about his book, The Catholic School Playbook, I think we're on the same page. Michael's fervent passion for cultivating schools with robust Catholic identities while fostering academic excellence not only makes sense, but it is quite simply the right thing to do. None of us can dispute that our culture has gone sideways. None of us can deny that our children need to be prepared to learn, grow, and thrive in a very competitive, not altogether charitable world. The mistake many Catholic schools make, however, is that they sacrifice their Catholic identity in the name of expediency, accommodation, or quite simply, an atrophied faith. But the world needs Catholics, and the world needs Catholic schools to form them. What has become apparent is that there is no longer a common culture where a set of moral standards was generally agreed upon. In fact, it probably never was. So if we're going to see our children survive as Catholics and pass it on to the next generation, then we need to practice our faith in our parishes. We need to pray and study our faith in our homes. And we need our children to experience robust formation under bright, engaged, and faithful teachers and visionary administrators who see the world and the lessons they are teaching through the lens of faith. The Catholic School Playbook explores how to do this and how to do this effectively. So whether you're a parent or a student, an administrator or a board member or a parishioner or even a seeker, read what Michael Ortner has to say and how he is saying it, and consider what your family, your parish, your corner of the globe will look like if it is informed and inspired by a Catholic school on fire for Christ. And one last thing. Be sure to read Michael Ortner's The Catholic School Playbook, but also be sure to read Pope Pius XI's encyclical, Divini Ilius Magistri, on Christian education, to encounter the priority with which the Church places the Christian formation of children. Education in the faith is one thing, but formation in the faith is quite another. So let's help the next generation and the one after, so that they may be well formed. Thank you once again for joining me on the Evangelization Culture Podcast. I'm Tod Worner, and until we meet again, keep bringing Christ to a hungry culture.